थिंग दैट स्ट्रक मी मोस्ट कि साहिर का कोई भी उस तरह से विजुअल फुटेज मौजूद नहीं है, कोई भी आर्काइवल शूट्स नहीं है उस तरह से। तो जब आपने स्टेज पे साहिर को जिंदा किया, सो व्हाट वर योर रेफरेंसेस?
कोई भी आर्टिस्टिक एक्सप्रेशन देना चाहते हैं जेन्युइन अगर, तो वो आपको अपनी जमीन में ही जाके देना पड़े। वो आप वेस्टर्न इन्फ्लुएंसेस से या कहीं और से बोरो करके आप उसको जेन्युइनली नहीं रख सकते। अगर आप किसी जमीन से आ रहे हैं, किसी खित्ते जमीन से हैं, किसी इलाके से हैं, किसी कम्युनिटी से हैं, किसी देश से हैं, और आप कुछ ऐसी भावुक सिंसियर जेन्युइन बात करना चाहते हैं, तो आपको अपनी ही कहानियों में जाना पड़ेगा। और अगर आप दास्तान में जाइए, तिलिस्म होशरुबा में जाइए, तो वहाँ अय्यार एक कैरेक्टर होता है जो ट्रिक्स्टर होता है। अय्यार की खासियत ये है कि जैसे आप बैठी हैं मेरे सामने, मैं अय्यार हूँ, तो मैं अपनी अय्यारी की पिटारी खोलूँ और अपना मेकअप वेकअप ऐसे करूंगा, और थोड़ी देर में आके मैं यहाँ बैठूंगा, तो असली प्रीता कौन है और नकली प्रीता कौन है कोई पहचान नहीं पाएगा। इट्स लाइक मंटो सेइंग कि मैं ये नहीं कर सकता हूँ कि लोगों को मरने के बाद उनको किसी लॉन्ड्री में भेज दूं और उनके कैरेक्टर्स को ड्राई क्लीन करके खूंटे के ऊपर टांग दूं। करप्ट नेता पहले भी थे, आवाम का पैसा पहले भी खा रहे थे, बिगेट्री पहले भी थी, तासुब पहले भी था।
तो आज क्यों नहीं कोई प्रोग्रेसिव राइटर्स मूवमेंट है उस तरह से?
हाँ, ये एक अच्छा सवाल है आपका।
So if I were to ask you that if one day your entire repertoire was to vanish, what was one play that you would want to rescue and why?
The word Urdu itself is kind of a misnomer. That's really not what the name of the language was. It's a deliberate mischief to name this language Urdu. As we grew up and as our society transformed in last 2-3 decades, the narrative has become more and more about inherited identities, and it's everything you do in some sense get disregarded, and it all just reduces to who you are and where you're coming from. And I think that's very dehumanizing. That's very disrespectful. If you become silent, you become complicit. And if you speak, no matter how irrelevant you are, there is somebody who would get solace from you. There would somebody who would get strength.
But we are often told to begin with context, career, credentials, categories. But sometimes just a mood can be a better introduction than facts. दानिश से मेरी सबसे पहली मुलाकात इसी शहर में हुई थी। वो किसी लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल के सिलसिले में यहाँ आए हुए थे, और फिर शाम को घर पे एक छोटी सी बैठकी थी। कोई औपचारिकता नहीं थी, सिर्फ कुछ दोस्त, बिल्कुल एक इंटीमेट सी सेटिंग, कुछ गजलें और दानिश की आवाज। He wasn't really performing that day, but he completely owned the room. And I can never forget that voice. बिल्कुल सधी हुई आवाज, लफ्जों की सफाई और एक ऐसी याददाश्त जो हर एक मिसरा बिना अटके दोहरा रही थी। और आज इतने सालों बाद मैं खुद को बहुत खुशकिस्मत महसूस करती हूँ कि दानिश की आवाज़ की ठंडी छाँव में फिर से बैठने का मौका मिला। हम बहुत सारी बातें करेंगे इत्मीनान से, फुर्सत में। साहिर से शुरू करेंगे, दास्तानगोई की गलियों से घूमेंगे, और फिर मंजिल का क्या, जुस्तजू ने वैसे भी किसी मंजिल पे ठहरने न दिया। हम यूं ही भटकते रहेंगे आवारा ख्यालों की तरफ।
वाह, क्या बात।
दानिश, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया, आपने अपना कीमती वक्त हमें दिया। एंड कैसा लग रहा है इतने सालों बाद?
थैंक यू। टू बिगिन विद, इन्होंने आवाज की इतनी तारीफ कर दी है, मेरा गला खराब है, और मुझे मुश्ताक अहमद यूसुफी साहब, द ग्रेट सटायरिस्ट, उनकी एक बात याद आ रही है कि जब कोई और आपका इंट्रोडक्शन करता है तो आप झूठ बोलने से बच जाते हैं।
नहीं, बिल्कुल मैंने बिल्कुल सच बोला आज। चलिए दानिश, let's begin with the play. मैं पल दो पल का शायर हूँ, and you've been performing this play for quite some time now across cities. The thing that struck me most कि साहिर का कोई भी उस तरह से विजुअल फुटेज मौजूद नहीं है, कोई भी आर्काइवल शूट्स नहीं है उस तरह से। तो जब आपने स्टेज पे साहिर को जिंदा किया, so what were your references?
I think when I was preparing for the play, and especially how should I create the physical persona of Sahir, and it is quite incredible because he is not somebody who's way beyond in the past. I mean, he's in the recent past.
Yeah.
उनका इंतकाल जो है 1980 में हुआ है, and still I could not find a single video footage.
Yeah.
I searched a lot, I asked a lot of people, but nothing. There are photographs, there are tons of photographs. I was able to find the audio, of
Hmm.
him reciting his poetry,
Yeah.
but not really much in terms of how you can create a physical persona. And Javed Akhtar Sahab, he met me और उन्होंने एक दो बातें बताई because he was a close associate of him.
Yeah.
तो एक तो उन्होंने बताया कि जब वो थोड़ा परेशान होते थे या सोचने लगते थे तो कंघी निकाल के कंघी करने लगते थे।
अच्छा।
और दूसरा कि वो ज़रा मुँह टेढ़ा करके ऐसे थोड़ा लाइक अ wry smile on his face, ऐसे थोड़ा मुँह टेढ़ा करके ऐसे बात करते थे।
हाँ।
और even though he was a great Urdu poet, but his natural inclination was to talk in Punjabi. So, and he had that thick Punjabi accent also. So obviously the Chopra brothers, B.R. Chopra and Yash Chopra,
हाँ.
उनसे तो वो पंजाबी में ही बात करते थे। तो these little cues were there with me, and of course you could see how he stands in the photograph, his posture, his demeanor. But I felt that it is not so much his physical persona, it is more the emotional and the intellectual personality that he had. And I felt that if I can bring out that part of his life with sincerity, कि मैं जो उनके ख़यालात हैं और जो उनकी शायरी है और जो उनके जज़्बात हैं, उनको मैं एक ईमानदारी के साथ, एक ग्राविटास के साथ स्टेज पे रख दूँ, तो मुझे लगता है काम हो जाएगा। It is not so much about getting a physical proximity. And I think I followed that route. I did not try to speak with my face a little wry, or though I do bring in the element of combing at a couple of places, but I kept it very minimum, and I stuck to mainly ensuring that the words I speak, which are his words, in a way where I own those words, and in a way those words should come out sincerely. और या मुझे लगता है कि कुछ हद तक कामयाबी मिली है क्योंकि लोगों को पसंद आ रहा है, लोग सराह रहे हैं, लोग I mean there are people in the audience who have seen it 3, 4 times, 5 times. It's incredible. There are people who have flown from different cities to watch the play. So it's very humbling and also very overwhelming that this kind of response your theatrical production is getting.
Right. So, but there's always a process to get under the skin of any character, right? And especially if you're trying to be more realistic about it. तो कभी तो मतलब, is it about body? Is it like more tactile about body language कि आपको एक ये hook मिल गया? So what was that moment? Or did you try to get into the soul of the person, or is it something more
अब
physical?
देखिए ये क्या है ना कि these are all abstract constructs.
That's true.
कौन क्या जानता, मैं अपनी सोल नहीं जानता तो साहिर लुधियानवी की सोल क्या
Absolutely.
जानूंगा मैं।
हाँ.
तो और मेरे ख्याल से कोई भी एक्टर जो है, आप you're basically using your own body, your own voice, your own mental construct
Yeah.
to enter into the character. When you do that, you do not actually become the other person. You are what you are, but you're just channeling your own physical resources into what the character is and making it credible and convincing for the audience to believe that this is the character.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what is more important, rather than because ये जो concept है ना, where you become actually the other person,
Yeah.
it is more like a utopian or a very idealistic concept which happens in तिलिस्म. तो अगर आप दास्तान में जाइए, तिलिस्म होशरुबा में जाइए, तो वहाँ अय्यार एक कैरेक्टर होता है जो ट्रिक्स्टर होता है। अय्यार की खासियत ये है कि जैसे आप बैठी हैं मेरे सामने, मैं अय्यार हूँ, तो मैं अपनी अय्यारी की पिटारी खोलूंगा और अपना मेकअप वेकअप ऐसे करूंगा और थोड़ी देर में आके मैं यहाँ बैठूंगा तो असली प्रीता कौन है और नकली प्रीता कौन है कोई पहचान नहीं पाएगा। और अय्यार जो है ना सिर्फ लगेगा प्रीता की तरह, वो बोलेगा भी प्रीता की तरह। Now that is something which is like really ideal. That's like you can never reach that. It can only happen in fantasy. And that's why it is happening in fantasy. In real life, we are constrained by who we are, what we look like. We can use prosthetics. We can, in post-production, we can use sound distortions, or we can play around with the sound because we have softwares now. We can use lighting effect. We can use makeup. We can do all those stuff. But still, the real is real. अब जैसे the more challenging character I had to play was Habib Tanvir when I did Habib Nama. Now, the challenge with playing Habib Sahab was that Habib Sahab is a more recent person. He passed away in 2009. He is well documented. There are plenty of interviews and features on him. There are a lot of people who are alive who worked with him and worked very intimately and worked very closely with him. So now to construct him on stage is a greater challenge because now he lives in the memory of the people who worked with him or who have seen him. And he's alive in the memory of those people. So when you are trying to create a physical persona of Habib Tanvir on stage, how do you make it convincing for these people who've actually been with him, who've actually lived with him? तो वो जरा challenge था. और मैंने because I've worked with Habib Saab in the last 5 years of his life, and I had the honor and the privilege of being part of his troupe and playing the Patang Wala character in his perhaps most famous play, Agra Bazaar. So that helped in the
वो
sense
आपका
कि
पहला प्ले था क्या शायद आगरा
नहीं
बाजार?
हबीब साहब के साथ मेरा
हबीब साहब के साथ
हाँ
पहला प्ले
पहला
था,
प्ले तो
अच्छा।
मेरा खामोश अदालत जारी है
अच्छा, हाँ,
विजय
विजय
तेंदुलकर्'s play
तेंदुलकर,
and that
हाँ।
was with Barry John.
हुँ,
So because I spent those last 5 years with him, that helped because
हुँ,
I had the opportunity to observe him from close
हुँ,
quarters as a director, as
हुँ,
an intellectual, as a playwright,
हुँ,
as just an intellectual giant of our times.
हुँ,
And I kind of channelized that memory. And then, of course, I went through a lot of interviews. I saw a lot of his
हुँ,
interviews, a documentary on him. Uh, and then I tried creating some kind of physicality. Now, the thing is this that one needs to understand. As I said, getting the exact persona is like fantasy that
yeah,
only an IR can do.
of course, हाँ,
What we do is kind of create a semblance of the personality.
हुँ,
This is akin to what, let's say, a cartoonist does. What a cartoonist does, what a cartoonist do is that he or she they just take few lines and they
हुँ,
draw a caricature,
yeah,
and you look at the caricature and you get the essence of the personality. So you know this is not the exact portrait,
yeah,
but somehow the way those lines are drawn and that
हुँ,
caricature is drawn,
हुँ,
it pulls out some aspects of the personality.
absolutely,
And the moment you see that caricature, you immediately recognize it as that person. I think that's what really actors do. So we hold on to some things. Like
yeah,
the thing that I hold on to was his voice. He had a particular style of speaking.
yeah,
So I tried imitating that voice.
हुँ,
I kind of observed how his posture was.
हुँ,
And I kind of brought those things.
हुँ,
But there also in Habib Nama, my intention was more to bring out the personality, something
हुँ,
akin to what your podcast is, which
हुँ,
is about conversations with people and
yeah,
and kind of create a flavor of this personality that you are talking to,
right,
which is जैसे उर्दू में जिसको खाकानिगारी कहा जाता था,
हुँ,
where writers or poets would write these small pieces on the lives and personalities of other people,
yeah,
where they would do Khakanigari. And Khakanigari may basically, they would give both the physical description of the person that they're writing about and also,
yeah,
uh, you know, few anecdotes about them and also about
yeah,
what their thoughts were and what they did. So in some sense, when you read through a Khaka of any poet,
हुँ,
you kind of get an idea as to who this person was, both in
हुँ,
terms of physical appearance
yeah,
and also in terms of their intellectual and their emotional makeup.
हुँ,
So I did the same thing when I did for Habib Sahab or for Sahir.
yeah,
कि आदमी क्या थे वो,
exactly, हाँ,
उनकी सोच क्या थी,
हाँ,
उनके ख्यालात क्या थे,
हुँ,
उनके पैशंस क्या थे,
हुँ,
उनका नजरिया क्या था,
हुँ,
क्या चीजें उनको पसंद आती थी, क्या चीजें उनकी टॉप ऑफ द माइंड थिंग्स थी, कि वो चीजें उनके बातों में परसिस्ट करती थी उनके। अब जैसे साहिर साहब के साथ he was a communist, he was a progressive writers
yeah,
poet. तो उनके लिए किसान, मजदूर, गरीब, अर्बन पॉवर्टी,
हुँ,
कैपिटलिज्म, एक्सप्लॉयटेटिव कैपिटलिज्म, uh, state excesses. These things matter a lot to him. And they would persist in terms of a regular refrain in his poetry and his work. और शायर साहब की जो दूसरी बड़ी बात यह है कि शायर साहब वो भले ही एक फिल्म की कहानी की सिचुएशन के लिए गाना लिख रहे हैं, लेकिन उस गाने में भी एक यूनिवर्सैलिटी थी, उस गाने में भी एक एको था जो उनकी अपनी आइडियोलॉजी थी या जो उनके अपने थॉट्स थे। और यही एक वजह है कि जब आप साहिर साहब के गाने सुनते हैं, those songs have grown out of the situation and the film that they were written for. They're universal songs. Yeah. They're remembered just by themselves. And that is because he was able to channel all these things into these songs and was able to make it into a more universal anthem, which people can remember and which people can memorize and which people can sing along. हबीब साहब का भी ये है कि आप उनके नाटकों को देखिए, जिस तरह के वो नाटक कर रहे हैं, because he was so his whole journey towards theater was in the sense that he wanted to be an actor, a film actor. And he went to Bombay to become a film actor. And he did get chance to act in few films. But then he got into journalism, and then he got into radio, and then he got into IPTA. And IPTA was a time when the real influence happened on him, where he realized that how much of folk music and how much of our traditional theater can be channelized into a people's movement, which is about the progressive writers movement, because IPTA was in some sense the theatrical wing of the progressive writers movement. तो वो सब उनके ऊपर बहुत उसका असर पड़ा एंड वो इन्फ्लुएंस लेके जब वो राडा गए और राडा जाने के बाद उन्होंने वहां पे थिएटर पढ़ा और फिर ओल्ड विक थिएटर में 1 साल काम किया और फिर 1 साल यूरोप घूमे और यूरोप का थिएटर देखा, तो उनकी समझ में आया कि आप कोई भी आर्टिस्टिक एक्सप्रेशन देना चाहते हैं जेन्युइन अगर, तो वो आपको अपनी जमीन में ही जाके देना पड़ेगा। वो आप वेस्टर्न इन्फ्लुएंसेस से या कहीं और से बोरो करके आप उसको जेन्युइनली नहीं रख सकते। अगर आप किसी जमीन से आ रहे हैं, किसी खित्ते जमीन से हैं, किसी इलाके से हैं, किसी कम्युनिटी से हैं, किसी देश से हैं और आप कुछ ऐसी भावुक सिंसियर जेन्युइन बात करना चाहते हैं, तो आपको अपनी ही कहानियों में जाना पड़ेगा और अपनी ही रूट्स में जाना पड़ेगा। You cannot be drawing from Western influences and hoping that you can say sincerely through others' experiences. That took him to Chhattisgarh. That took him to folk artists and folk theatre, whom he has seen in his younger days. और उन folk artists के साथ उन्होंने काम करना शुरू किया. And if you look at the plays that he did, he is talking about the urban-rural divide. He is talking about the kind of rough shoulder we've given to tribals or to the native people or to the indigenous people. He is talking about cultural decline. He's talking about language appropriation. He's talking about casteism. So eventually, जो अगर आप कुछ भी क्रिएट कर रहे हैं, चाहे साहिर के बारे में क्रिएट कर रहे हैं या हबीब साहब के बारे में क्रिएट कर रहे हैं, तो you cannot ignore or you cannot shun away from these things because these things were the very important aspect of their personalities. That is what made them. आखिर हम अपने बारे में भी सोचें, हम कौन लोग? आपका एक अपने बारे में ख्याल होगा. There'll be some mental construct that you have about yourself. This is what Preeta is. ये प्रीता की identity है. ये प्रीता के main concerns हैं. ये प्रीता का ख्यालात हैं. ये प्रीता की passions हैं. Similarly, the same thing goes with me. Now, these things are constructed from multiple things. They are constructed from our conditioning. They are constructed from our family background, from our cultural influences, from our school, from our university, from extended family, neighborhoods, mainstream media, the popular dominant narrative when we were growing up. All these things are confluencing and kind of creating a mental construct of who we are. And a lot of times when how others look at you and how you look at yourself is very different. Yeah. अब जब आप इस तरह की चीज क्रिएट कर रहे हैं, साहिर बना रहे हैं, हबीब साहब पे एक प्ले बना रहे हैं, तो आपका एक इंटेंशन होता है कि मे बी यू कैन ब्रिज दैट गैप. एक परसेप्शन क्या है, आदमी क्या था, वो कहीं बीच में आ जाए, जिससे कि आपको एक थोड़ा सा 360 डिग्री काइंड ऑफ व्यू जो है उस आदमी के बारे में मिले.
I think a memory is, of course, again, it's not about recording. It is a kind of intervention. कि you choose what you want to abandon and what you want to keep. तो जैसे जावेद साहब जब साहिर की बात करते तो उन्होंने बोला कि काफी पैराडॉक्सिकल कैरेक्टर थे, उनमें एक तरफ बहुत एक्सट्रीम जेनरोसिटी थी और फिर एक तरफ काफी एरोगेंट किस्म के थे. सो डिड यू फाइंड दैट व्हाइल यू वर रिसर्चिंग ऑन साहिर और आपने किस
एब्सोल्युटली,
या
एब्सोल्युटली। और देखिए, आपको कॉन्टेक्स्ट समझना पड़ेगा। साहिर साहब का बचपन जो था ना, वो बहुत ही ट्रॉमेटिक बचपन। मतलब खुदा ना करे किसी का बचपन इस तरह का हो। तो उनके his father had absolutely no love for him. I mean, the play begins with this anecdote where Sahir says कि मेरा नाम अब्दुल हई इसीलिए रखा था क्योंकि एक पड़ोसी का नाम अब्दुल हई था और मेरे बाप को उसे गालियां देनी होती थी। तो वो अपने मिलने-जुलने वाले किसानों के साथ आंगन में बैठ जाता था और ऊँची-ऊँची आवाज़ में अब्दुल हई को गालियाँ देता था। और अब्दुल हई अगर एतराज़ करता था, तो वो कहता था, "मैं अपने पुत्र को गाली दे रहा हूँ।" तेनू की? तो his great kick in life was that I have named my son Abdul Hai so that I can throw cuss words at my neighbor Abdul Hai. So just imagine what would be the mental state of that child whose only association with his father is that my father just uses me as this punching bag, as like a surrogate, because my father hates my neighbor. So he has given me the same name as what my neighbor's name is, and he's just using me as a surrogate punching bag. It's traumatic. Plus, of course, his father had no love for his mother, and he was a philanderer. And when he decided to move on to another woman, Sahir's mother decided that she would take him away, which she did. And she went to her brother's house, and that's where Sahir started growing up. उस बीच में साहिर के बाप ने ये धमकी दे दी कि अगर उसको मेरे पास नहीं दिया तो मैं उसका कत्ल कर दूंगा. The reason was there because he was the lone heir to the property. So Abdullah, it was not because Abdullah had any love for his son, but he felt that because there is no heir, the property might just get dissipated. Other people might just, claim the property, and this whole wealth will be lost. So, in order to ensure that the property and the wealth stays, he wanted the son back. And when he realized the mother is not giving the son back, he went to the extent of threatening the mother. कि अगर उसको मेरे पास नहीं भेजा तो मैं उसका कत्ल कर दूं. Now, the father is a resourceful man. वो जमींदार है, उसके गुंडे हैं. माँ एक उसे कहते बेसहारा औरत है जिसके पास कुछ इतने रिसोर्सेज नहीं है और वो अपने बच्चे को पाल लिए अपने भाई के रहमो करम. तो अब उनका मेंटल स्टेट क्या होगा? तो माँ ने अपने जेवरात बेचकर 2 बॉडीगार्ड्स तैनात किए. Just imagine, we're talking way back in 1920s. In 1920s, to kind of spend some money, hire 2 bodyguards just to keep an eye on the child. Now, just imagine the state of mind the child will be in. What would you be instructing that child? You would be telling the child to be suspicious of everyone. You'll be telling the child, don't talk to strangers, don't interact with anyone. Always be aware of the fact that there are these 2 bodyguards around you. Always make sure that you're not away from these bodyguards. Just so a child who's 7, 8, who's growing up with this kind of a atmosphere, what kind of a mental makeup will he have? He will have trust issues. He would not be willing to trust anybody easily. And that theme kind of plays inside.
And how does that person become a socialist?
Because of course he one of the reasons is because his father was a feudal lord. So he in some sense had an inside view to feudalism and how feudalism is exploited. And that and obviously, so all this is kind of channelizing his feelings towards whatever. His father becomes a symbol of oppression. So whatever the father is oppressing, the natural affinity of the child is towards that. Father is oppressing mother, so mother is someone to be protected. Father is oppressing the laborers and the farmers, so the laborers and the farmers are the people to be protected. And then, of course, as he is growing up, he's studying, he's going to college, his worldview is changing, and all this is kind of coming into him. So, which is making him fiercely pro-poor. and anti-wealth and anti-elite. Because his father is the symbol of death. His father is the symbol of elitism.
Yeah. आपने प्ले को म्यूजिकल बनाया and so was that choice was it to add some lightness to the narrative, nostalgia, या फिर
भाई
बिल्कुल
देखिए ऐसा
political?
है कि मैं एक प्रोड्यूसर एक्टर डायरेक्टर हूँ लेकिन प्रोड्यूसर भी
प्रोड्यूसर भी
है ना
जी
प्रोड्यूसर जो है वो क्या चाहता है वो चाहता है रिटर्न्स ऑन द इन्वेस्टमेंट
जी
है ना और प्रोड्यूसर ये चाहता है कि भाई मेरी चीज दूर तक जाए ज्यादातर लोगों तक पहुंचे तो अब मुझे एक बैलेंस काइंड ऑफ चीज बनानी है कि अगर कोई आए देखने के लिए तो इतना हैवी भी ना हो जाए
हाँ
कि वो बेचारा जो है दुखी होके और
हाँ
परेशान होके निकल जाए कि यार बहुत ज्यादा उर्दू हो गई और आई एम नॉट एबल टू एसोसिएट with a lot of things that are being told about that man or that period or that history और इतना हवा हवाई भी ना हो जाए कि खाली एनेक्डोट्स हैं और गॉसिप है और कहानी और गाने हैं और there is no meat in it. So I had to find the midway where in some sense I kind of make it massy and cater to all kinds of audiences. So there are people who might be very interested in the intellectual side of it, the progressive writers movement, the pro-poor, the communist in him. There might be people who are more attracted towards his poetry. There might be people who are interested in his stories about his film life and how he got entangled with this person or with that person. So I had to kind of keep all of that together. And also, to be fair, everything is part of his life. When he was arrogant, that is also him. It's like Manto saying कि मैं ये नहीं कर सकता हूँ कि लोगों को मरने के बाद उनको किसी लॉन्ड्री में भेज दूं और उनके कैरेक्टर्स को ड्राई क्लीन करके खूंटे के ऊपर टांग दूं हैंगर पे सो द थिंग इज दिस दैट all that is him only. So if he's arrogant or if he's snobbish, that's also him. If he's generous, that's also him. If he's poetic, that's also him. If he's distant and aloof in love, that's also him. If he's obsessively caring about his mother, that's also him. And I think all these aspects need to be brought in. हाँ और अच्छा ये भी होता है कि कुछ चीजें किसी भी आर्टिस्ट की ना मेन स्ट्रीम में होती हैं तो वो ज्यादा पॉपुलर होती है तो उसकी वजह से क्या होता है लोग उसके बारे में जानते हैं अब साहिर साहब के जो गाने हैं वो बहुत मकबूल हैं तो इनफैक्ट you'd be surprised people who came for the play a lot of people are अरे ये साहिर साहब का गाना है अरे
कौन सा गाना था
कोई से भी मतलब almost every we have like some 20 songs that we play
Do
live
you keep changing the songs or
no
same you play the same?
because we have to give royalty for those songs
Yeah.
so we play 20 songs and also those songs are not random those songs are built into the narrative so there is a reason why a song is coming at a certain point so we can't really fiddle around too much with that तो अब वो आता अरे ये गाना तो साहिर साहब का था मुझे पता ही नहीं था so it's a great surprise for them and a very pleasant surprise of course there is a whole generation of people who know that this is Sahir's songs then the youngsters the youngsters knew the songs they did not know who the man is they did not know who the writer is but they knew what the song was but then there are also many things which are not in the mainstream like his poetry जो लोग लिटरेरी हैं या जिनका शायरी में से जिनका लगाव है या जिनको ज़ौक़ है वो लोग जानते हैं लेकिन बहुत से लोग जो हैं वो नहीं जानते हैं so I also thought that this is also a good way of introducing his poetry what other things that the man was writing so like this whole famous nazm of his where he's talking about farmers and he's talking about laborers कि आज से मजदूर किसानों मेरे गीत तुम्हारे हैं फाकाकश इंसानों मेरे जोग बहाग तुम्हारे हैं जब तक तुम भूखे नंगे हो ये नगमे खामोश ना होंगे जब तक बेआराम हो तुम ये नगमे राहत पोश ना हो मुझको इसका रंज नहीं कि लोग मुझे फनकार न माने फिक्र सुखन के ताजिर मेरे शेरों को अशार न माने मेरा फन मेरी उम्मीदें आज से तुमको अर्पण है आज से मेरे गीत तुम्हारे दुख और सुख का दर्पण ब्यूटीफुल very simple Nazm, but so effectively it states the man as to what he felt and how he was willing to put everything on stake. कि आज से मेरा फन मेरी उम्मीदें आज से तुमको अर्पण है, आज से मेरे गीत तुम्हारे दुख और सुख का दर्पण है. It's kind of a vow, a oath he's taking in the song, that from today onwards, all my poetry, all my talent will be in service of the poor. And these songs will not sit quiet till the time I ensure justice is given to these people. It is another thing that when he becomes famous and he's charging shitloads of money. I mean, there's this anecdote in the play where we say, कि, uh, when his songs, when Pyasa became a great hit, and he became, you know, the currency in the songwriting market. And one Seth comes to him and he says, Ki, I want you to write songs for my film. And Sahir was in no mood. So, and Sahir says, at that time, I used to get 1,000 or 2,000 rupee for writing a song. So Sahir was in no mood, and Sahir says, Ki, Seth, तुम मेरे गीतों की कीमत नहीं दे पाओगे.
अच्छा.
So he says, कितना लेगा? 1,000, 2,000. He says, पूछ के क्या करोगे सेठ? साहिर अपने गीत बेचता नहीं है. And then, you know, he's sitting and just smoking a cigarette. And the Seth is also sitting there. And after a brief pause, the Seth says, 10,000 lega. And Zahir is also surprised because that's like a 10-time jump in his fee.
Yeah.
And Zahir says, yes, I'll take it. And he writes the song for that Seth. And after that, Zahir says कि मैंने इंडस्ट्री में खबर फैलवा दी कि साहिर अब आज से 10,000 रुपए लेता है यार. And then, of course, you know, he became one of the highest earned songwriters in the history of Indian cinema. So much so that he reached a stage in his life where he would decide who the music director was. Normally, it's the music director who would decide, but Sahir would decide who the music director for the film would be. And then later, when Rai Masum Raza is writing his novel Scene 75, classic novel about the inside take on Hindi film industry. And in that, Dr. Rai Masum Raza he's making fun of himself also, and he's making fun of his contemporaries also, and he's also making fun of Sahir, that अपने को कम्युनिस्ट बोलता है और he has sold himself सरमाएदारों के हाथ, capitalist के हाथ, he has sold his soul. So there is this criticism also that despite the fact that he was so pro-poor, he had a lavish, rich lifestyle, which was a contradiction and in some sense a hypocrisy of his whole anthem about being pro-poor. But then also there is a side of him being very generous.
Yeah.
You know, when his friend Ram Prasad Ash, he gets cancer, Sahir sends him to America and spends lakhs and lakhs of rupees in that period for his friend's treatment. When in 1964, Sahir gets Filmfare Award for Taj Mahal song, जो वादा किया था वो निभाना पड़ेगा. He goes on stage and he says, I don't deserve this award. Shailendra deserves this award because his song Matro Mere Lal from Bandhani film is a better song. And he refuses to take the award. And he says this award must go to Shailendra. So I'm saying there is this other side of the man. Yeah. His sister is saying that whenever he used to come to Allahabad, he would never sit on a cycle rickshaw because he would think that it is an insult to another human being that the other human being should be bearing the weight of another human being. And he would always just walk from the station to the house and just keep the luggage on the rickshaw, and the rickshaw would come with the luggage. So there are these phenomenal contradictions to this man, paradoxical contradictions to this man. And I think that's what makes him very enigmatic. That's why Sahir is such a mystery to kind of which is inexhaustible. You want to go to that. It's like what Louis Gluck is saying, that that's what makes poetry so attractive. Yeah. Because there is something inexhaustible about poetry. Every time you dive into the poetry, it nourishes your soul. Yeah. But still you come out feeling a little thirsty. You come out feeling that your thirst has not been quenched. And you dive back into it. And you can dive as many times as you want into great poetry, into great literature, into great fiction. But you would always feel that you've not completely got it. There is something inexhaustible about it. And I think that's really what Sahir is. And that's why he's so attractive. You know, there are plays about him, there are writings about him, there are documentaries about him, because you just can't get enough of the man.
So when you were trying to bring him on stage, तो ये enigmatic personality उनकी, that was more attractive to you, या उनका political persona? What exactly were you trying to, what did you want the audiences to leave with? What was your
I think
communication?
more about what the man was saying,
Yeah.
because I think any work of art, whether it's visual or performance or cinema or poetry or theater, any work is always about the time in which it is created.
Yes.
Even if you are writing a historical, or if you're writing a science fiction, or you're writing an abstract piece, or you're writing a fantasy piece, it is always about the contemporary times that you're living in. That's really what it is about. So I felt Sahir as a man who's speaking to our times. What is happening to our times? Here is a man, and this is something which the audiences has echoed with me. That they say, when you're sitting there on stage as Sahir and you're talking about his poetry, and you're talking about his thoughts, and you're talking about his ideology, it almost feels like you are addressing the people of of our times.
So those times and these times, can you equate when Sahir was writing, or I've just...
Well, in some sense, yes, because evil is very banal, and evil doesn't change its color, and evil has the same playbook, and it's only getting worse over time. But the tricks and all the um, what I would say, the sleight of hand is the same. वो नहीं बदला है. वो करप्ट नेता पहले भी थे, आवाम का पैसा पहले भी खा रहे थे, बिगेटरी पहले भी थी, तासुब पहले भी था.
क्यों नहीं कोई प्रोग्रेसिव राइटर्स मूवमेंट है उस तरह से?
हाँ, ये एक अच्छा सवाल है आपका. आजकल ऐसा क्यों नहीं है? और मुझे ये लगता है कि the kind of world that we are living in, our senses have been dulled. Our senses have been inundated with so much extra, which is not about nourishing us. And our senses has been dulled. So much so that one of the most peculiar feature of our times is self-censorship. Everybody wants to play safe. And it is because our institutions have deteriorated. You know that if tomorrow you were to stand up, you will not get any recourse anywhere. You cannot trust judiciary, you cannot trust bureaucracy, you cannot trust the executive, you cannot trust civil society.
Yeah.
There was a time when civil society would stand up for you. You cannot trust media. So we are kind of and then there is social media, and then there is advertisement, and then there is consumerism. So what is happening? We are constantly bombarded with things to dull our senses and to divert our attention. We're not talking about things which would nourish us. We're not talking about healthy food. We're not talking about healthy environment. We're not talking about medicine. We're not talking about diseases. We're not talking about intellectual nourishment. We're not talking about culture. We're not talking about heritage. We're not talking about preserving the intangible part of our culture. We are talking about what? We're talking about products. We're talking about looking good. We're talking about living in better housing societies. We're talking about everything which is destructive of the planet that we live in. So in this kind of, when you're constantly living in an ecosystem like that, which is completely dulling your senses and diverting your attention, it just becomes harder to kind of step up and say that, to challenge the powers to be. It just becomes harder. And I think there is also an erosion of ethical values. There is also an erosion of what I would say, some kind of values, some kind of norms, some kind of standards that we held ourselves to. So how does any system works? It works on trust. So there was some unsaid norm, there was some civility that a person needs to be treated in this particular manner. There was a sense of fairness, there was a sense of justice. That has been eroded now. Now everything is instantly seen from a lens of, oh, this is a suspicious narrative. Everything is seen from a lens of conspiracy. So even if somebody is fighting for justice, you immediately start attacking the person, or there has to be a motive. Why is this person talking about justice? So what you do, you sidestep the issue of justice, and you really make it about the person, and you just shift the narrative, and then it just goes into this labyrinth of accusers and counter accusations, and that's where it just ends up, a kind of a painful, torturous death, as if we all are madmen, just banging our heads in a labyrinth, and we don't know where the way is, how the way is out. We don't know that.
So this is where I want to bring in another play that you perform quite often with Rajesh Ji, Chinese Coffee. And यहाँ बिल्कुल मतलब साहिर वाली दुनिया से बिल्कुल एक और अलग दुनिया है जहाँ पे दो लोग सिर्फ बैठे हुए हैं, and there is this invisible sort of loneliness, and it's almost like looking at a world collapsing in slow motion. So do you think that is, and when it's like people showing their exhaustion when the world has stopped listening, do you think that is closer to the times that we live in now, that sort of isolation, एक अजीब सी loneliness, ये बिल्कुल एक अलग, इसने first of all, what drew you to this story?
Well, Chinese Coffee is an Ira Lewis play.
Yeah.
He wrote it in, I think, early 80s or mid 80s, and it was a comeback play for Al Pacino on Broadway in 1992. And it's about these two failed artists who've been on and off friends. One person looks at the other as a mentor also, or as a critic also. And both of them are, middle-aged men who have really not achieved anything in their lives. They're down and out. Yeah. Yet there is a lot of hope in there. And it kind of reflects the psychological ramifications of urban living. Yeah. The growth of urban cities and how lives in urban cities have shaped individuals. And so from joint family, we break into nuclear families, and then they also break. And now we have basically people drifting along. And here are these two men. And men anyway were most of the time also, when they were in joint family or nuclear family, they were philandering and they were drifting away. Yeah. Now they don't have that anchor anymore. And here are these two people completely down and out. But yet, one of them has hope. One of them still believes that he can still make it. He can still make it. He can still crack through this whole, cloud of despair and loneliness, and can zip across it to some sunshine. And this whole novel is about, the whole play is about these two characters, where one has written a novel, the other is criticizing the novel, and the novel is also about the two of them. And the whole conversation, it just brings about how personal, how the dynamics of personal interrelationship takes place. You see envy, you see jealousy, you see hope, you see at times empathy. You see how your best friend is also your best critic at times, and you also see how envy kind of destroys everything. Uh, so I thought it was a very telling story, and it kind of resonated because, with all great stories, they are very universal. Yeah. And it doesn't matter where they are localized, where they are positioned, but when you read as an audience, they resonate, and that's what great stories do. And it resonated with me, and it happened in 2007 when I was in the US. I saw the four DVD set box of Al Pacino's unreleased films, and being an Al Pacino fan, I was like, oh shit, I have to buy this thing. So I bought it, and Chinese Coffee was one of the films in that. And when I saw it, I was like, wow, this is art. These are men like me. Yeah. And immediately after, when I was watching the film, I sensed this is a play. Two actors talking to each other, more storytelling. And well, I Googled and I realized it is a play. And then I purchased a copy of the play. And then when I came back to India and I started my theater company, this was one of the plays that I wanted to do. So I bought the rights for the play here in India, and we put it. And it is one of our longest running plays. I mean, 2012.
How does the audience receive it? And I mean, is it very
Brilliant every time. We just had a show in Pune in June. We've been doing this play for 13 years now, Rajesh and I. And because Rajesh and I are also great friends, so in some sense, we become Jake and Harry on stage. Because in some sense, a lot of the play is about us. Yeah. And also our friendship, which is also some 25 years old. So, there's too much us in that play, and it shows when we are performing, because that friendship is also playing out on play. We are not two random actors put together to play a story. We also in our real lives are like Jake and Harry. Yeah. And I think it plays out well. Hmm. So we've spoken about, one end where you're काफी poetic play है आपका साहिर वाला, and फिर this is at the minimalist spectrum, so end of the spectrum. So, and I'm sure there is a lot in between. So if I were to ask you that if one day your entire repertoire was to vanish, what was one play that you would want to rescue and why? And one character. I never thought like that. You think about it now. And I'm coming to that point in my life where I think this whole idea of surviving beyond your own existence is some kind of a primal thing which is in our genes, which is about ensuring that our genes kind of continue. And it kind of manifests uh, beyond the gene part, beyond the species part, into our emotional, intellectual life as to our work should survive us, our ideas should last beyond us. Um, I think it's vanity. I I didn't mean by what you should be survived, but what I meant was what would you rescue? I don't know. I think I would rather rescue my own goodness if there is some goodness in it. I doubt that, but I would rather rescue that because at the end of the day, when I'm really dying, I need to have a conscience that I was not unfair to people. I think that is what is more important than what work of mine should survive. I think work, once you create any work and you put it out in public, it's out. It's gone. It's not yours. It becomes public's work. Yeah. It is really on public to decide what should survive. Mohammad Hussain Jah wrote these fantastic dastans. And in 1883, the first Tilis Mein Hoshruba volume got printed. For 100 years, it was lost. When it came out, it was the darling, the toast of the literati in that period in Lucknow, in Delhi. Ghalib was, obviously Ghalib died before Muhammad Hussain Jah, but there were Dastans, manuscripts in Ghalib's time, and Naval Kishore, the publisher, he was publishing other Dastans. He was a friend of Ghalib. Ghalib used to love Dastans, and there is a famous quote that I have just received 4 volumes of a Dastan and a casket of wine. What else do I need in my life? But for 100 years, the man disappeared. Nobody knew about Muhammad Hussain Jah till we arrived on the scene. Yeah. And we started performing those stories again. And then other scholars were also there working concurrently. And Muhammad Hussain Jah is back. He's alive again. So I think your work has a life of its own. And whether it will survive or not survive is really depending on how the work speaks to the posterity. That is true, but I'm kind of thinking this the sort of emotional detachment that you're able to have with the characters that you. मुझे याद आ रहा है जैसे मार्क्वेस जब उन्होंने बताया जब वो 100 Years of Solitude लिख रहे थे और काफी कई सालों से लिख रहे थे और जब वो नॉवल खत्म हुई तब उसने कहा कि I went into a real deep mourning. मुझे लगा मैं उन कैरेक्टर्स के साथ नहीं जी पा रहा हूँ या जब मेल्की एड्स की डेथ हुई तो मुझे लगा कि सच में कोई मेरा मेरे बिल्कुल करीबी दोस्त जो है मेरा वो उसकी डेथ हो गई है तो आई एम जस्ट ट्राइंग टू आस्क यू दैट उसकी वजह मेरे ख्याल से ये है कि those characters were created by Marquez. I'm not creating characters. But of course you're creating in I'm kind of I'm using other people's work and creating them on stage.
I want to ask you, what is the difference? I mean, because yours is also an authentic form of art, even though if some
डिफरेंस
you
ये है
are
कि
bringing.
वो लोग माँ है, मैं बाप हूँ.
Okay.
उन्होंने जन्म दिया है और मैं उसको नर्चर कर रहा हूँ.
जी.
So I think it's a collaborative process, and I think theater, cinema, all of these are very collaborative process. And I think I'm not. I think my strength is more when I have an idea. My strength is more on building on that idea and creating something rather than writing something new.
Huh.
And I've realized that I'm the moment kind of I start getting to a collaboration, I work better rather than when I'm left solo to myself. And I think that's why, in some sense, I do not see things as my things because they're collaborative. Because
That you're writing poetry as well, right?
वो तो हम कहाँ के दाना थे, किस हुनर में यकता थे, बेसबब हुआ गालिब दुश्मन आसमां अपना. अब वो कहाँ हम, मतलब ठीक है थोड़ा बहुत लिख विख लेते हैं उसको. मुझे नहीं लगता कि हम शायर कह सकते हैं अपने आप को.
अच्छा.
हाँ.
See, I want to delve a little bit deeper into this grammar of theater. और इतने नाम हम सुनते हैं. Of course, I mean, for me, theater was never a form I would enjoy as much as I would perhaps enjoy reading a novel. But and even plays for that matter, I enjoy reading like stories rather than plays. पर फिर हमने इतने ब्रेक Beckett की बात करें कहीं, और ये हमेशा बार-बार, we are being forced to read these, and somehow they just keep coming into our consciousness, और गिरीश कर्नाड, तेंदुलकर. So ये इनमें से whose lines or whose work kind of echoes, किसकी आवाज आपके पास, बार-बार, who has been your influence when you create theater amongst these stalwarts?
देखिए, जो पहली बात आपने कही, उसकी वजह है कि बिकॉज theater is collectively participative rather than you reading a book, which is an isolatory activity.
Yeah.
A theater or watching cinema, especially when you are in a hall, of course, theater you cannot watch by yourself. You can only watch a copy of it on a screen, which is not really theater then. It has been changed into another medium. But theater you can only watch collectively in an audience, with an audience in a theater. So that whole dynamics kind of changes when you're watching it collectively and experiencing it collectively with other people. And that is an irreplaceable thrill. You cannot replace it, no matter however you create it, in whatever shape, wherever. But you cannot replace that collective experience which is there when you're watching a theater. And if it happens to be great theater, then obviously it's completely irreplaceable.
Yeah.
The second thing is this, that you asked me about influence. Of course, when I did not have any formal training in theater or in cinema. It's just that I felt my life was getting wasted at working at bank, and I wanted to find something more meaningful and something which I would enjoy doing, and that kind of took me towards theater. And also, I was not a literature student. I was trained in economics. So my youth was spent, even though I was not a great student, but I spent a lot of time reading economic theory and economics and macroeconomics and microeconomics and game theory, economic thought. So whatever I was reading more because I had a love for it, or I enjoyed reading it. So whatever literature or poetry I was reading, it was not structured kind of reading. It was not like a course material. So it was like whatever I would like, I would wear towards that and read that, and then something else will turn up. So it was very, in some say, like a wild meandering, and then it took me to theater. So I had no idea of what the what are the schools of theater, what is the ideology of theater, what is the theory of theater, uh, or for the same thing, literature. It was more like what I like, what appeals to me, I read that. So I would know only that. So when I came to theater, That's when I got introduced to Vijay Tendulkar and Badal Sarkar and all these people. And that's when my mind started opening to the world that we were in. Because in some sense, I was a privileged and elite kind of a boy growing up in Delhi, uh, quite insulated from the world, not really understanding the harsh realities of the world. Um, and the world was very much what Delhi was. So when I started reading Vijay Tendulkar and Badal Sarkar and Habib Tanvir, I started realizing that this country is far complex and dense and beyond where we are. And it kind of started appealing to me. I kind of started reading more about our history, more about our culture, more about our immediate politics, more about how our social hierarchies are, and in some sense, it's kind of started forming, the person that I was, who I would become, or who where I would want to go to, and also because I was growing up in a Shia household, so Karbala was a huge narrative and this whole injustice that was done to Imam Hussain. So this whole idea of always standing with the oppressed, always kind of being with the underdog, and the same echo is kind of following me when I'm reading Badal Sarkar or Vijay Tendulkar or I'm reading Habib Tanvir or Girish Karnad for that matter, and I started moving towards that. I did a bit of English theater also, like Tennessee Williams or Neil Simon or uh, Arthur Miller, but it always felt very alien to me. That world, that language, and it's very strange. Even though I had education at a public school, and even though at the university level, when I was working in bank, all our medium was English, and it was English that I felt closest to. I would only read English books. I would only read English poetry. But when it came to performing, I suddenly felt it was not me. This world of Tennessee Williams or Arthur Miller or Ira Lewis's or Samuel Beckett is not my world. Who are these people? What are they talking about? I don't understand this language. What are these metaphors? What are these illusions? What is the cultural context of this metaphor? This is so alien to me. I understand the Hindi muhavras and I understand the Urdu muhavras because that's what my ears have grown up hearing. I do not understand the spin on the language which English language is giving me. And who am I talking to? Who is this person? All that made me feel very alienated from English theater. And I lost interest in English theater. Uh, so much so that I would, um, so much so that I would decline doing English theater. And I found so much joy doing Hindi theater or Urdu theater because this was the world I could understand. This was the world I could realize. Now, the thing is this that bringing you to the earlier point that I was making as to we are now living in an atmosphere which has been dulled completely. The thing is this that we have created silos and we have created these delusional spaces where everybody is inhabiting right now. And we don't want to talk about harsh realities. Can we talk about casteism? Can we talk about religious bigotry? Can we talk about intolerance? Can we talk about injustices happening anywhere else in the world? Can we talk about uh, the gender oppression? Can we talk about the sexual oppression? It is sad that we cannot have any kind of a healthy presentation of any of these things in literature or in arts or in cinema now. Because the moment you would do that, censorship would heavily clasp you. You know? I mean, there's this lovely film that came out, Santosh, which went to Cannes, which is talking about, police oppression and which is talking about casteism. And it's banned. You can't show that film here.
We will touch upon these aspects
So, no, so that's what I'm trying to tell you. The point that I'm trying to say is this, that when I entered theater, and what veered me towards these writers like Vijay Tendulkar and Badal Sarkar was the politics of it. Was they were writing stories which were really from the heart of our country and which resonated the injustices which are happening in this country. And I felt these are the stories that we should share. These are the stories we should create as artists, because art has a great, powerful way of reaching out to people, which you cannot do in opinion columns, which you cannot do in books, which you cannot do in documentaries. It has a way of creating storytelling, and that's the reason why storytelling is so powerful, because it is closest to an actual experiential learning. No, it actually takes you on a journey without you going anywhere. Yeah. And that's why storytelling is next best to having a real life experience. And that's why the power of it is so important, to reach out to people and to tell stories that should matter to people. So and that's what, that's, yeah. Sorry. No. So that's why I want to stay with the grammar a bit more. Um, so I think there are these two basic schools. एक तो Aristotelian school है जो, which says that a story should have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the audiences should be completely immersed in it, and in the end there should be a certain catharsis. और जबकि Brechtian school है, which is completely anti-Aristotelian in that manner, जहाँ वो उनका theatre काफी fragmented है, and then he's constantly breaking the fourth wall, and or वो constantly suddenly they're speaking to the audiences, the character comes out of the play, and the idea is not to leave the audiences with a catharsis, but to discomfort them. So what is your school of theatre? How do you want the audiences to react, and where do you lean toward? I think it's somewhere in the middle. Okay. Because as Habib Tanvir says that our indigenous theatrical culture disregards the Aristotelian unities of time and space. And our culture only understands unity of rasa. So what is important? Ras should be there. है ना? उसमें जो एक लताफत है, वो होनी चाहिए. और अगर वो लताफत है तो आप कहीं भी abruptly कहीं भी शुरू कर सकते हैं, and the people will get the context. And that's because our indigenous artists, they were not like just performers. They were living their performances in their daily life. No, so they could disrupt their life and begin a performance, and you would immediately, you would immediately kind of get attached to the performance. Yeah. So what Habib Tanvir is saying, that what Brecht is saying is not unique to what Brecht to Brecht. This is something that the Indian and the Chinese and the Tibetan have always been doing. Yeah. We've been breaking the wall. Yeah. We've been talking to the audiences. Absolutely. We've been creating something which is very us, and yet at the same time it is disregarding the Aristotelian unities. Yeah. So if you call that thing, so Brecht is using the same influences to create his theory of breaking the fourth wall, of disregarding these unities. And we've already been doing this. Yeah. So now Tanvir is saying that if I create something which is ours, from our culture, disregarding all these unities and only maintaining the unity of rasa, then what we are creating is simultaneously Indian and also Brechtian. And I think it is not to disregard what Aristotle is saying. It is not to disregard what the Western influence is saying. Every culture is creating something out of their own context. Yeah. So what is working there is working there. Shakespeare is working there, and Shakespeare is working there. And it's great. The influence is all over the world. What we are doing is working here. And that's the way it is. That's what you're doing in storytelling. You're going stories within stories within stories within stories. Yeah. That's really what is happening in the Middle East. Yeah. When you have Alf Lela, and you have story within story within story, or you have Shahnameh, or you have Tilis Mein Ho Shubha, which is very Indian thing. You are going story within story, which is not linear. You're breaking the story and then getting into another thing, and then you're coming back. So I think what is more important is whatever works. It does not matter which is. It is a futile debate as to what is superior. I think our cultural context grew in this manner, where we disregarded other unities and we only looked at the the unity of rasa, whereas the others were more linear in that sense. There is a middle, there's a start, there's a middle, there's an ending. And also, I think what one needs to understand is um, any kind of theater, any kind of performance art, any kind of literature is also really in the context of the society and the world and the political world that you're living in. Maybe subversion is something that we used to do more, you know. Maybe we were living in more authoritarian times. Maybe our art was truly democratic. Our art had truly percolated to the lowest level. And these lowest level people did not have ways of articulating in the corridors of power as the theater, which was an elite activity happening in West, would do. So they need to create a more subversive kind of narrative. And they found it by disrupting the unitaries. And they only held on to the unity of rasa because that's the only way they could disrupt it. So I think one has to understand as to where all this is coming from. Who are the people who are doing it? Our folk artists are not people sitting in the court. They're not getting patronage from the British monarchy. It's not royal Shakespeare court. So I think this also kind of influences as to how narratives are created.
So is that why you gravitated towards Dastaangoi? Because that is an art form jahan there is no fourth wall. I think in a way it kind of escaped the Aristotelian trap way before Brecht came along to challenge it. And so what? How did that happen? And tell me more about.
See, Dastan, I mean, it is a storytelling tradition, and it's been a very long storytelling tradition, almost for 1,000 years now. It kind of came to India in the medieval times, primarily with the Mughal emperors when Humayun was in exile in Iran, and when he came back to India, he came with a couple of storytellers in tow, and then that whole culture of listening to Dastane Amir Hamza kind of started propagating, so much so that by the time Akbar comes on throne, and there was a storyteller called Takaltu Khan who came with Humayun, and Takaltu Khan's son Darbar Khan becomes the chief royal storyteller in Akbar's court. And the influence is so much of the stories that he's telling that Akbar commissions the largest art project in Mughal history, which is Hamzanama paintings, where these stories are illustrated on canvases 2.5 feet by 3 feet. And some 1,400 folios are painted over a period of 15 years in the Mughal atelier. And there are some 300 plus artists who are doing that. And this becomes like a precursor to most of the North Indian school of paintings. Because when the Mughal Empire starts, crumbling, a lot of these artists, the next generation, they kind of go ahead to look for patronages, and they go to Jodhpur House, to Jaipur House, to to the Madhya Pradesh area, to various other smaller constituencies, and they become the in-house artists there, discovering and creating and inventing newer schools of painting in India. So, in some sense, Hamza Nama and the Mughal atelier at Akbar's court becomes a precursor to most of the medieval North Indian schools of painting. So, these stories, and then these stories, they kind of from Persian idiom they find the Indian idiom, which is the Rekhta language, which is kind of a mix Hindi language coming up in 16th, 17th century and the 18th century. And by the time 18th century happens, it is a full flourishing franchisee where you have storytellers who are telling stories of Amir Hamza all across the northern part of the country. And when Fort William College comes up in Calcutta, and one of the reasons for Fort William College coming up is it is kind of a training center, like an orientation center for the East India Company officers to acquaint them with the Indian culture. And how should we acquaint them? Dastane Amir Hamza is seen one of the texts through which the British officers could be acquainted to Indian culture. So it becomes institutionalized, and it's now being taught at Fort William College. And for the first time, these tales come in print form at Fort William College in 1805 or something. And then by the time we are in the middle of the 19th century, it is a full flourishing enterprise across North India, where any man worth his name is keeping a storyteller in his or her retinue. And these storytellers are very well paid. They are much sought after, and they are telling stories all across the country. And by the time we are in the latter half of the 19th century, post the 1857 war, um, printing press has come into India, and Munshi Raval Kishore is hugely into printing almost anything that he can get his hands on. And he's commissioning all these storytellers to write these stories that they've been telling as oral franchisee. And by 1880s, we have these tales coming up in print. So, sorry, I forgot the original question that you asked.
Yeah, I just asked you about Dastaangoi. Kaise, how did you gravitate
Ah,
towards the
yes. So the thing is this, that I have grown um, watching Marcia Goi, and especially when Marcia Goi is performed
What's the
in
difference between Dastaangoi and
So Marcia is the long form epic poems, which are basically elegies and not elegies, lamentations, because the word mars is the Arabic word which means to lament. So Marcia are basically these lamentation poems, these dirges in some sense, and they are essentially centered around the sacrifice of Imam Hussain in Karbala, and they were performed mainly in Muharram period. And of course, the two greatest proponents of Marcia Goi are Mir Anis and Mirza Dabir, who are Ghalib's contemporaries and who lived in Lucknow. So it's a very high form of art because you're reading poetry in a very performative style, and because this is in meter, a Marcia would normally have one set will have a quatrain and a couplet. So a quatrain, 4 lines, and a couplet, that's one set. And one Marcia can go up to 300 sets or 350 sets or 500 sets. So these are long poems, and these are all about the Battle of Karbala. And there is a structure to it. There would be an introduction, a chehra, then there is Ahmad, how the Imam is approaching the battlefield, and then there is the challenge, and then there is the battle description, and then you have the witness, the martyrdom happening, and then you have the lamentation happening. So there will be like 8 stages in which the poem would go through, and there'll be sets which will be kind of written about each of these phases in that one long epic poem. And it has to be performed in a manner where आप जिसे कहते हैं मंजर निगारी करना, कि आप अपने बयान से अपनी स्टाइल से वो विजुअल्स क्रिएट कर दें ऑडियंसेस के दिमाग पे. So I'd grown up watching that, but because of the way it was performed and because of the context where it was performed, it some sense was a kind of a religious theater. It kind of restricted itself in the spaces it was being performed. So when I was working with Habib Tanvir on Agra Bazaar, and I remember 2005, we were performing in Dehradun. And after our performance, he said, "Tomorrow we have a show of Dastaangoi, and you guys should go and watch it. And if you are an actor, what's your name? Then you should be acquainted with this art form." It immediately spiked my interest, and I went next day and I watched it, and I was like, "Wow, this is it's using the same registers, it's using the same idioms, the same metaphors, the same language, but it is in a more secular context. And these are fun tales, and these are fantasy tales." And sure enough, that's the way it was. Most of the Dastango writers were also Marsiago writers. So when they were not writing Marsias in Muharram, for their livelihood, they were writing Dastans in non-Muharram period and earning their living as storytellers. So it obviously resonated the same, same structure, same registers. And it is something that could be performed anywhere. You don't need to have a religious context for it. It could be performed in a theater, in a conference, in a wedding, in a social gathering, in a bar, anywhere you can perform it. The other great thing about Dastan was that Dastan has a very open, fluid structure. You can say anything in a Dastan. It doesn't have to follow, again, it kind of disrupts the Aristotelian unities. It doesn't have to have a middle, a start, and end in that sense. You can start from anywhere, and you can go anywhere, and you can come back, and again, you can go anywhere, and then again, you can come back. You can have a sides. So, in that sense, it's like, uh, how do I say it? Like, like Ali Khan Mahmoodabad says very beautifully in this book that he writes, Poetry of Belonging. And he says that what nationalism does, that it puts a normative horizon. So everything, all other identities kind of get subservient to the national identity. So whether you have what caste you belong to, what religion you belong to, what class you belong to, everything, that normative horizon, it falls below that. But when a mushaira is happening, that's one of those times when you can break that normative horizon. You can go on stage and your shade can disrupt anything. You can say anything that you want, and it can disrupt even the normative horizon. That's exactly what Dastan is doing. It disrupts the normative horizon in the sense that there is only this way or this much you can say in an opinion column. There is only this much you can say in a long essay form. There is only this much you can say in a novel or in a book or in a documentary or in a film. But Dastan allows you to break all those forms and you can say whatever. And yet, in some sense, the disruption is not breaking the unity of the Dastan. So like in an essay form or in an opinion column, the moment you make a detour, your editor would put a mark on it and say like, hey, where is this argument going? This is not in coherence with whatever the rest of the piece is. So the editor would immediately cancel it out. But in a Dastan, it gives you that leverage that you can say whatever you want to. It disrupts. And I think that's what really I liked about it. And it brings again back to the whole thing that I said earlier as to why certain forms evolved in a certain way. Is because maybe the linear form of start, middle, and begin was not conducive to the stories that we were telling. Maybe we had to be subversive in our storytelling. Maybe we had to disrupt in our storytelling, and that's why we held on to unity of rasa, and that's why we have these. This is something akin to what Beckett is doing as absurd theater. He's disrupting. So that's exactly what we are doing. We are disrupting, and yet because of that unity of rasa, everything is held together. So even though you feel this is non sequitur, this has nothing to do with what this man is telling. This shade that's coming in the story, this anecdote that's coming in the story, this aside that this person is giving in the story is non sequitur. It has nothing to do with the narrative. Yet it kind of holds sense. And this is something which another art form that does very successfully is Qawwali, where it disrupts the normative horizon, where you are able to bring in something completely different into the narrative, and yet the coherence of the performance is not disrupted.
And also the fact that you perform mostly in Urdu, and of course, jo bhasha, it's become such a contested space. It is anyways vanishing from textbooks and state records. And, very weird. It's just been romanticized to an extent कि सिर्फ वो romance की language शायद उस लोग उससे शायद heartbreak को ज़्यादा जोड़ते हैं. So do you think this is also your way of kind of turning a language of softness into a language of resistance as well?
It's how do you marginalize the language? To marginalize the language by making it a language of the enemy, to marginalize the language by reducing it to only one aspect of it, though it's just a language of romance or just a language of softness. But what is eventually you're trying to say? You're saying that this is a language of decadence. Because that's what you want to portray. The people who speak this language are from a decadent culture. And that's why this language is only about poetry and is only about alcohol and it's only about romance because it's a decadent culture that we're talking about. And that's how you marginalize language. You marginalize language by cutting it off from the school curriculum. You marginalize this language by visibly making the language disappear from the social, perception. And you kind of run narratives like this. But Urdu is more than that because it was the lingua franca of this country for 200 years. It was essentially the language for dissemination of information in the 19th century. Because when when the printing press came in the 19th century, and especially in Lucknow and also in Punjab, where the British government kind of said that all printing press all the printing presses would be publishing in Urdu only. So Urdu became, in some sense, the main language of instruction.
Yeah.
So a lot of knowledge dissemination, which was happening, especially the modern education, in the late 19th century and early 20th century, was happening through Urdu. Also, when the printing press came in, a lot of journalism that happened in Urdu was actually the journalism which was taking on the Western philosophy, which was taking on the Western imperialism, and which was talking about nationalism. So, in some sense, Urdu was also becoming the language of revolution. Now, these are the aspects we have chopped out. We do not talk about how Urdu was a vehicle for dissemination of information. We've chopped out how Urdu had such a critical role in the revolutionary aspect of this country. And I think these are things that need to be brought to fore now. I mean, you run into so many people, especially from North India, from Punjab or the other part, and they say, "Oh, my grandfather used to read and write in Urdu and speak Urdu. In my family, I've seen everybody. How? You're a Punjabi. How did your grandfather knew Urdu so well? Because it was the source of dissemination of information. Because that's how everything was being taught. Yeah? So I'm saying that it is very important to understand these things and bring these things to fore. Also, the whole thing about Urdu, and I think the word Urdu itself, uh, it's kind of it's kind of a misnomer. That's really not what the name of the language was. It's a deliberate mischief to name this language Urdu because it's coming from a Turkish word, Urdu, which is the English word horde. And all these hordes used to come from Central Asia attacking. So, because in Turkey, the hordes or the army things were called Urdu. So, when the Western historians or people, when they heard Urdu, it kind of manifested into hordes. Yeah. And now, what is the thing that you get in your head when you say horde? So Urdu, while it was developing in India, it was a confluence of many things. Yeah. And it was not just one way. The army was not one way of how Urdu language came up. There was Saraiki, which was caravans where this confluence of conversations were taking place, where Urdu was developing. There was Bazaar. People were trading. People were from all sorts of regions were coming and they were trading in the northern part of the country. There was Karkhana. So you have Saraiki Zaban, you have Bazari Zaban, you have Karkhandi Zaban, which is the factories where all these people were working. And then there was Lashkari Zaban, where because most of the soldiers that were being employed were Indians. So in some sense, the administration had to have a conversation with these local soldiers that they were hiring. So you just take one aspect of Urdu, Lashkari, and you turn it into Urdu and say it is the language of the army soldiers, which basically, in some sense, you're saying who were coming from abroad, but they were not coming from abroad. Most of these soldiers were actually Indians. So there were 4-5 aspects of Urdu languages, and Urdu actually was rekhta, which basically means a potpourri. So it was a potpourri language. It is a very much an Indian language. It kind of evolved in India and it took influences from all these other languages. But to reduce that to just one word, Urdu, which is a reminder of Urdu and hordes, is to kind of do disservice to this language.
So, Danish, Dastaangoi, वैसे I think it's a far more rooted form, right? Which you're always performing it in spaces which are very elite. India Habitat Center or Prithvi Theatre हो गया या corporate festivals हुए. So do you feel do you feel the tension between the form and where it's supposed to land and the spaces where you actually get to perform them?
See, Dastan historically is an urban form and historically is an elite form and was performed with royal patronage and used very high literary register, which is not a common man's language. These are not folk tales. These are very high literary fantasy tales created for a very rich urban audience. And that's where it prevailed. Now, where we are performing today, Dastan, is also the world that we live in. We are living in a very consumerist world where I believe that a lot of our expenses are pretense expenses. We in today, in order to survive in the society that we are in, we have to keep up with a lot of stuff, and we have to earn accordingly to meet those expenses. And we have created barriers. We have created barriers like malls, so the market has disappeared, and now mall, and there's an entry in mall, and everybody cannot just enter the mall. There is a hesitation if a man belongs to a lower background. We have created auditoriums and theater, which has an entry barrier to it. You have to buy a ticket to be there, and not everybody can afford that kind of ticket. And that's because the economics of the economy of theater is like that. In order to survive and meet my expenses, I need to perform in these spaces and have that kind of ticket. Otherwise, I will not be able to cover my expenses. And even then, it's most of the time break even. It's not really a sustainable project. So it's unfortunate that we live in this kind of a ecosystem where it necessarily pushes us to keep all our performance art in some sense elite, in some sense for an audience that can pay for it. And that purchasing power and that paying capacity is only with few people. So it becomes a form which is appreciated and talked about in only that circles. And also, uh, I mean, even though data is cheap now and almost everybody has cell phone and can access it, but then the art form is not disseminating at that level. That's why you would see TikTok reel or reels from rural areas or from smaller towns. Sometimes they are meaningless reels, but they have millions of views because that's something what is accessible to them, and that's what they're watching. They're not really interested in this kind of a high literary kind of a performance. So it is our challenge as how do we take it out of these elite places, take it to marketplaces, take it to centers which are not so privileged, and bring and break it down and bring it into a language which is more accessible to people. I mean, when Amir Khusro was writing high Persianate poetry, that's what Nizamuddin Aulia was telling him. Write in the language of the people, and then most of his later compositions became that. Chhap Tilak, for that matter, and that's when his poetry became very popular. It got disseminated within the local people. So that's what Nazir Akbar Abadi is doing. That for the longest time, the Urdu pantheon of poetry did not consider him as a poet, but he was writing in the idiom of local people. And today, Nasir Akbar Abadi is considered as one of the greatest Urdu poets that we had. So it is our challenge. How do we break this into a more accessible medium? Which I think Habib Tanvir was able to do that by using the Chhattisgarhi language and using the Nacha form and bringing that into modern urban theater. He kind of broke that boundary. So his theater was simultaneously accessible to an elite proscenium watching audience, and his plays could be performed anywhere. And that's what he was doing successfully. I mean, if you go to Karnataka and Shimoga, all these farmers who are tobacco farmers, in daytime they are producing tobacco, but at nighttime they are performing their folk theater, and they have these trucks. And these trucks sometimes they use it for transferring their stuff, their goods, their crops, and sometimes these trucks also become make believe makeshift theater, where the truck they open the panels and it kind of becomes like a stage, and they just perform in the open with that truck. So I think it's our challenge how we do it, and I must admit that I've not been able to crack it. So, do you think your audiences can the least be just aesthetically stirred and not politically motivated? Well put. I think so. I think a lot of our urban audiences is is like that, and I think that's how the urban elites have always been. They've been too much about aesthetics and not so much about politics, and that's why if something aesthetically goes wrong, they get very violated about it. But they it doesn't irk their conscience when there are bombs dropping and when there are children dying, or when there are people being lynched, or where people are dying in sewage or out of hunger or out of unemployment.
But your voice is sharply political. If I look at your persona outside your work, be it your lectures elsewhere, be it your posts on social media, be it wherever you're speaking, you have never shied away from speaking anything. So then don't you feel कि आप अपने form को सफदर हाशमी की तरह किसी नुक्कड़ पे ले जाएं? Yeah.
I think
I understand that there's a structural issue to that also, but
I think I don't have the courage like that. Or maybe I haven't evolved in that sense. I mean, Safdar Hashmi was a brilliant man who could understand how to channelize, how to 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 kind of guide his art form and his craft and his practice towards the service of really the downtrodden and the oppressed people, and he did that very successfully. He lost his life at that. I don't think I have the courage, or I don't think more than courage, I have not been able to crack that in terms of vision as to how do I do that. Uh, and I think maybe it comes from a lot of privilege that I've lived in. So maybe like Sahir, I like my comfort. While I do my poetry, this is the way Sahir did.
So then how do you define the cross section that you are in? You have a distinct Muslim identity. You are a Muslim public figure, and there are other identities that you don. So how what are the things that you're negotiating?
I mean, this is I remember when I was doing the Seen and the Unseen podcast with Amit Verma, and this thing came up, and I said, when I look at identities, I broadly divide identities into two sections, and I call them the inherited identity and the acquired identity. The inherited identity is something which you have no working in that. You didn't have any hand in that. It just came in your lap. So my being brown skin, my being Indian, my being North Indian, my being Muslim, my being a Hindi Urdu speaker, these are all inherited identities. Acquired identities are the identities that we create ourselves.
Yeah.
So me being an artist, me being a theater person, me being a Dastaangoi, me being a poet are acquired identities, things that I've worked for. Now, in any society which is progressive, which works towards evolution of its members, you focus more on acquired identities. You want to provide education to people. You want to provide amenities to people. You want to provide a safe environment to people. You want to provide law and order. You want to preserve human dignity. You want to preserve human rights. And in that kind of an atmosphere, the acquired identity becomes more important. You're more interested in people becoming doctors and engineers and educators and artists and musicians and craftsmen. Um, uh, Rather than focusing on their inherited identity. But when a society becomes aggressive, when it becomes authoritarian, when it becomes fascist, it it wants you to think more about your inherited identity. It does not want you to focus on your acquired identity, because by pulling you towards your inherited identity, they can keep the narrative alive, a narrative which will sustain them in power. But they can't do that if the focus is on acquired identity. So I think in any discourse, in any narrative, the more you see a push towards inherited identity, the more authoritarian or fascist or regressive that society is. And the more you see the push towards acquired identities, the more inclusive and the more evolving that society is. And I think the struggle is this, that when we were growing up, our focus in our family or this ecosystem that we were living in, we were more pushed to think about acquired identities. We were more pushed to think about be a scholar, be a writer, be a professor, be an engineer, be a civil servant, be a doctor, be an engineer, do something. It was never about you're a Muslim or you belong to this category of people. So this needs to be preserved. Yes, there was an insistence to learn Urdu. Yes, there was an insistence to learn literature. But that insistence did not come from the fact that this is your identity. That insistence came from the fact that this is our heritage. This is high literary heritage, and that should be preserved. But the preservation was not because this is our inherited identity. The preservation was because this is something valuable that we have inherited, and yet the focus was on acquired identity. But as we grew up, And as our society transformed in last 2, 3 decades, the narrative has become more and more about inherited identities, and everything you do in some sense get disregarded, and it all just reduces to who you are and where you're coming from. And I think that's very dehumanizing, that's very disrespectful, because it kind of negates a lifetime's work. It kind of negates who people are. I mean, it's just coincidence, or it's just one aspect of my life that I happen to be Muslim.
How does it show up in your life? Are there paths you're not offered? Are there places you're not invited to?
I'm sure.
Are there
I'm
other
sure. I mean, I'm not. मैं पसे मंजर नहीं हूँ. I'm not behind the screen, so I don't know how those decisions are being made. I'm sure perhaps I'm getting excluded at some places, but I can't be sure about it, because if you get excluded at one place, there is one door opening for you also. So, but I'm sure, I mean, these things do matter. I think these things do work. I mean, if not so much for me, certainly we see that in our society today. It's increasingly hard if you belong to a certain section or to a certain community to kind of be mainstream, because there is less and less space now given to you. More and more spaces, either in public representation or in mainstream media or in mainstream society, those restrictions are working out. I mean, one of the criticism for panchayat is that panchayat happens to be one village in UP, and there is absolutely no representation of any Muslim in that web series. It's astonishing. If you go to any UP village, there is always a section of Muslim in that community. There is almost a section of the Dalits living in that village. How come there is a model village in UP where in the storyline there is no representation of any of these guys? So all this is marginalization. All this is omitting people from the popular narrative, and that is happening. So if it is not happening in terms of work, it is definitely happening in terms of narrative, where either you're being demonized or you're being completely omitted from the popular narrative.
So then this political persona of yours, where you haven't really shied away from speaking against the CA, against public lynchings, or yeah, shayad Gaza ki baat kar le, you've shown extreme ethical stamina where a lot of people do shy away from speaking things and there are real risks involved. And I think this is not a part of your inherited identity as such. So when did you uh, stop being an artist? Of course, but while you were being an artist, when was the moment that you also became a witness?
I think a lot of it comes from Karbala and from Imam Husain's sacrifice, because I think the basic lesson in that whole event that took place 1400 years in that desert next to Euphrates River is that if there is a certain ideal and certain value and a certain truth you stand for, then it does not matter as to what your numbers are or how many people believe in you. What matters is that you uphold that standard, irrespective of the cost you're paying. I don't know if I paid that cost or if I will pay that cost, and when it comes to really me paying that cost, how much I will stand up, or how much I will, my litmus test, how much I will pass that. But I think it is also important to raise the voice, because if you become silent, you become complicit. And if you speak, no matter how irrelevant you are, there is somebody who would get solace from you. There would somebody who would get strength from you. And I think that's why speaking out is important. Even if you're not in the thick and thin of it, even if you're not battling out, I have great admiration for people who actually go out and get arrested and face the consequences and are hounded, and yet they hold on to their values. Someone like Omar Khalid, for that matter. But even if I'm not there, by being silent, I'm being complicit. I am I'm kind of inadvertently supporting the mainstream narrative, and I think that's what the ecosystem wants you to do. It wants to silence you out. It wants you to comply. It wants you to fall in line. And अगर बाग में हर फूल एक ही रंग का होगा तो बाग फिर बाग नहीं So somewhere we are in a society struggling from the inception of civilization of finding that balance between individual uh, freedom and individual expression and a collective discipline and a collective norm of living in a kind of a civilized or in a kind of a mutually agreeable society where where everything is not left to individual women fancy, and we are struggling with it. But the thing is this, that the more the power kind of coalesces and the more power kind of becomes centralized, people who are in power become uh, very eccentric and whimsical and arbitrary, and that is detrimental to society. So forever we are in this tug of war between individual expression and individual freedom and collective kind of disciplining, where we can live our life in a manner where it is comfortable, in a manner which is where it is nourishing, and yet at the same time it gives us space enough to evolve as individuals, and we don't lose our individual expression.
Yeah, I wish all the power to you. And in the end, I just want to ask you what is in the future, not under the spotlight perhaps, but what kind of questions are you grappling with now? Or what is it that you're longing for? What kind of stories do you want to be part of? क्या चल रहा है अभी दिमाग में?
I feel I've been very selfish in my life. I have thought only from my perspective. And at times in that wake, it has led into things getting disrupted in my life. People bearing the cost of my selfishness, whether it's my family or my friends. Um, and somewhere I think it hurts. And I can't undo how I've lived my life. But I want to be gentle now. I want to listen now. I want to understand now. I want to give space now. I want to add value to other people's life. Uh, Not because it is some altruistic thing that I want to do. I just feel that we all should be a source of comfort to others. The least we can do is not disrupt other people's life. Uh, we should be responsible for our decisions. We should understand that there are repercussions to what we choose to do and what we don't choose to do. And I think we should be more mindful. And I think that's really what I'm aiming to do now. And I don't know how successful I am because, your traits don't abandon you immediately. So, sometimes desire, wish, selfishness, willingness, all these things creep in. But I think there is more awareness now. I'm trying to become more mindful now. I'm trying to be more gentle now. And I think that's really what I wish. I don't really know I don't think in those grand terms. I look at work and I look at the work in terms of the merit of the work, and I try to do justice to what work I'm trying to do, and I don't think beyond that. So I think my horizon has changed. I'm not thinking of, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that, and I want to create this legacy and I want to create that work and I want to be remembered like this. I don't think like that anymore. I think more like living in the present, and in the present creating something meaningful where the work also adds to people's life. Maybe it gives them comfort, maybe it gives them strength, maybe it gives them a thought to mull upon. Um, Maybe it just pleases them. Maybe it just brings a smile on their face. Maybe it just makes them forget who they are for a while. And yes, that's it. I mean, I think that's really what the work of art is, where it transforms you once you have interacted with it. You are not the same person what you were before engaging with art, and post engagement you become a slightly richer person. And I think that's really what it is to it in terms of both personal and professional life, where you make things richer, not because people should think about you or you should have a legacy, or Really, no one cares. There is so much happening, people would forget. Uh, and then maybe you may live in the memory of people who were with you, and when they die, you'll be gone. I mean, you really need to be like Gandhi or Martin Luther King or T.S. Eliot or Ghalib to kind of survive centuries. And I think those are not aspirations worthy in the sense that these people were not creating because they should be remembered. They were just creating. And because the work they did was of such high caliber that it resonates across epochs and across time and across geography boundary. And I think that is what is important. And yeah, that's it.
So there's always something revealing about when you're asked to choose, especially when both choices matter to you. So it isn't about final answers, it is about what surfaces when you're pushed to pick a side. And that friction kind of gives us a long explanation, which we might have missed otherwise. So here's a small set of instinctive questions, not to define you, but to disturb the dust just enough to see what settles where.
Ah,
And we call this section from the archive.
okay.
So I'll ask you Brecht or Beckett?
Brecht.
Girish Karnad's Tughlaq or Vijay Tendulkar's Khashiram Kotwal?
Both.
Okay. One more Dastan or a new original play?
Both.
You have to choose that.
No, I'm a man who lives with multiple things. Everything is possible for me. Why must I choose if I can do both?
That was the whole idea for you to choose. Anyways,
But it's defining me. It's telling you who I am.
Okay. Theater in a black box or street performance at a crossroad?
The producer in me tells me the black box. The artist in me tells me the street performance.
Film industry fringe or theater mainstream?
There is no theater mainstream, and the theater mainstream uh, is a bad copy of cinema trying to be on stage.
Okay.
So it's certainly fringe.
Okay. Playing a character you politically disagree with or rewriting him completely?
Oh, I would play a character which I politically disagree with
Okay.
because that really gives me a chance to step into somebody else's shoes.
A performance that moves no one or one that divides the room?
One that divides the room, undoubtedly.
Studio theater in Mumbai or a courtyard in Awadh?
Both.
Danish, choose.
Both. Yeah, both. Why? I'm a performer. I would love to perform everywhere.
A poem by Darwish or a dastan from Tilisme Hoshruba?
A poem from Darwish is slightly alien to me. A dastan is more closer to me.
Mirza Ghalib or Mir Peki Mir?
That's a tough one. Both.
Silence on
You can't really appreciate Ghalib because if not appreciating Mir,
Mir.
because Ghalib himself is saying कि देखता कि तुम्हें उस्ताद नहीं Ghalib सुनते हैं किसी अगले जमाने में कोई मीर
कोई
भी
मीर
था.
भी हुआ करता था. Silence on stage or interruption from the audience?
Silence on stage.
Sahir's bitterness or Fez's hope?
Fez's hope.
Acting for camera or acting for an empty hall during rehearsal?
Both.
Manto's short stories or Krishan Chandra's satire?
Both.
A standing ovation or a difficult question from one person in the audience?
A difficult question from one person in the audience.
Okay, I'll leave it to this. Danish, in the end, what is the one poem that you're एक नज्म जो आप हमें सुनाना चाहते हैं, you want to leave us with आपकी आवाज में?
There are many poems that are very close to my heart. I don't know which one to recite. I mean, in lieu of the conversation that we were having, I'm just remembering 2-3 lines from Noormeem Rashid's poem, Rege Di Roos. It kind of talks about the vanity of who we are. Rege Di Roos means yesterday's sand. Reg means sand and Diruz means yesterday. And he's saying, Hum mohabbat ke kharabon ke makin. We the inhabitants of love's ruins. रेग दिरूस में ख्वाबों के शजर होते रहे. He kept growing trees in yesterday's sand. साया नापैद था. साये की तमन्ना के तले सोते. The shadow was absent. He kept sleeping under the hope of a shadow. And I think that's really what we are. I mean, these three lines encapsulate so beautifully the vanity of our existence. And it pushes you to a point where you start questioning yourself. And I think we are sentient beings whose primary responsibility is only to ensure that the gift that we've been given, which is the earth we are living, to live it and then to hand it over to posterity, if not worse, if not better, then not worse. At least we hand over to posterity the world that we inherited, which is slightly better for them. Unfortunately, we are handing over a world which is which is showing climate change and which is showing worsening of everything. So I think our primary responsibility is only this as sentient beings to live and to hand over the amanat that was given to us in a better form to the people who are coming after us.
चलिए दानिश, जाने क्या तूने कही, जाने क्या मैंने सुनी, बात कुछ बन ही गई. This was a soft record.